The long-awaited Bleach captain tier list based on nothing other than my pure subjectivity. I love all of these captains, so if your favorite captain gets a little shit on, please don't mind it too much, it's all for fun. I'm not really ranking these captains based on like power or drip, kind of just a mix of everything, how much I like the characters, how much I like their design. Their strength and everything does play a role in it, but it's more of a full spectrum of how much I like the captain as a whole. So ladies and gentlemen, let's get this started. Also guys, this video will contain some spoilers about the manga, so just a heads up, spoiler warning, you know the deal. But what the hell, how did I end up down here? So guys, let's break down the tiers to start with. Firstly, we have God tier. These are my absolute favorites. Like these captains are completely God tier as the tier suggests. That's where the S tier would typically be, but I felt S tier was too normy. Then there's A tier. These are captains I absolutely love who just didn't make the God tier, followed by the B tier. These are captains I just like a lot. You know, I don't have any rhyme or reason necessarily for having them in B. They're just someone I like a lot, but not love. C, of course, is the mid tier. And for the D tier, that's more so characters I wish we could see more of throughout the story that we don't get to see that much of. So it's hard to kind of rank them. E is the E tier. And these are, you know, captains I don't really care for, to be honest. And then the question marks, well, those exist for 3 specific individuals who I know nothing really about. So we can start it off by putting the question mark individuals. Amagi, he's the captain from the filler arc that I have yet to watch yet, so obviously I can't rank him. Here's the Kenpachi that our current Kenpachi beat to become Kenpachi. And then lastly on this list is Byakuya's dad or grandfather, whichever one it is. I can't really speak on him that much. He has such little time in the anime. Okay, now that we have the question marks out of the way, let's actually get this officially started. Let's start with our boy Toshiro. Our boy Toshiro has ranked so high in popularity polls, it kind of boggles my mind how much he's adored by the fandom. Listen, I like Toshiro a lot, which is a little bit of a spoiler because he is indeed the B tier. I like him a lot, but the fact that he ranks so high in these popularity polls continually confuses me, but he's a solid captain and a solid character we get to see time and time again. Throughout the series, he doesn't win that many fights, and his Bankai is kind of one of the least hype Bankais because, you know, every time he busts out his Bankai, it doesn't mean that a win is incoming. It's actually pretty often that it'll still result in kind of a loss. So, you know, that kind of takes away from everything a little bit. Obviously, he gets a ton of screen time, which of course makes him really likable, and I like his edgy demeanor, but he isn't a captain that I absolutely love. Next, we have Isshin Kurosaki or Isshin Shiba. Isshin is fantastic. We only get to see him very briefly in the Everything But the Rain flashback with him being a captain, but he seems to be great. He seems to be really jokey. I loved his relationship with Toshiro in Rangiku, but again, we don't see him that much as a captain, but I will say in the flashback with Everything But the Rain, he was hilarious, so I'll put him in the mid tier. Kenpachi, Kenpachi, Kenpachi. I don't know anybody who actually dislikes Kenpachi. Kenpachi's one of the captains who every time on screen, you know it's about to be a badass battle, and that makes his character so lovable because really he is all about the scrap all the time, and he genuinely doesn't care about anything else. Kenpachi has some of my favorite moments within the 1,000-Year Blood War, particularly with him actually getting his Shikai, and of course his Bankai, although his Bankai for me was surprisingly a little bit of a letdown. I like the Shikai a lot more, but nonetheless, Kenpachi is someone I adore and I love, so I'll rank him in the A tier. He's a strong A tier, but listen, that God tier exists for certain individuals. And speaking of certain individuals, next on our list is Kisuke Urahara. Kisuke Urahara has my #1 fight within the 1,000-Year Blood War with Askin Naklavar, and I really hope whenever it's animated, there's actually more depth to the fight, because it was only 2 or 3 chapters, and Kisuke has, for the most part, run the entire story himself. Him and Aizen side by side have dictated the entire plot, and he's someone who is the most resourceful man on the planet, despite his quirky and funny demeanor. He's a character who drives the story so heavily, and I found it so intense that after he was betrayed by Aizen, he made sure he would never get got again, and that's one of the reasons I love Kisuke Urahara so much. Not only being a mentor to Ichigo, he is a mentor to all of us. Particularly when he trains Ichigo, and he tells Ichigo when he swings his sword, he should cut to kill and not hold anything back. That with every action he takes, he should do it decisively without hesitation, and I think that's something that's really translatable to the real world, and if you know me and if you've seen my channel before, you know that's something I geek out upon. So Kisuke Urahara will be our very first God tier. And next we have Mayuri. Mayuri, when he was first introduced into the story, to be honest, I didn't like him that much when he fought Uryu, and I thought he was kind of weak, but he grew on me throughout the entire story of Bleach, and particularly within the 1,000-Year Blood War, he came to shine quite literally with his sunshine outfit, and he had a lot of great central moments throughout the final arc, and Mayuri is a god amongst men, or perhaps a devil amongst men, because Mayuri is quite nefarious, and that's one of the reasons I love him. I will put him in the A tier alongside our boy Kenpachi. Next, we have Hikifune. Hikifune we see for literally like a reference in like half a chapter within the Turn Back the Pendulum arc. And of course we see her within Squad Zero, but we're not ranking Squad Zero. So Hikifune, yeah, I'll put her, I'd like to see more because I don't know what she was like as a captain, but clearly Hiyori loved her. So if Hikifune could somehow reel in Hiyori and have her calm down, clearly she was a pretty good captain, but we just don't see enough of her. Rukia. If any of y'all know, since the very first video I made of Bleach over a year ago now, Rukia has been my all-time favorite character, and I just adored her because of how she introduced the entire story of Bleach to both Ichigo and us as an audience member. Rukia is an S-tier character as a whole. I love the way she's depicted throughout the story, and she's such a great deuteragonist to Ichigo. Time and time again, every time I see Rukia on screen, I'm always happy. Even though she doesn't get to win a lot of fights particularly, she's a fantastic character, and she as well drives the plot a ton. However, as a captain, we don't get to see much of her in action given she becomes captain at the end of the story, so for that sake, I'll have to rank her in the A tier because this is a captain's ranking, of course. If it was a character ranking, you know she'd be my S tier. Next, we have Ukitake. Ukitake is a character I wish more than anything he had more fights on screen and on the panels, but he doesn't. And Ukitake is just an individual who feels so wholesome. He feels like a big brother who's ready to help you with anything you need. And his demeanor, despite being so sick, is always inspirational that despite his sickness, he's still so happy and kind to all those around him. And obviously in the last arc, he literally sacrifices his life for the sake of the rest of Soul Society, which is badass. So I can only hope that within the Hell arc, we get to see more of him. But unfortunately, due to having no intense fights throughout the anime, I'll have to rank him in the B tier, so I like him a lot, but, you know, the love is questionable. You know, I'd love him a lot more if we get to see a little bit of fighting. But hey, we can't have everybody be an A tier or God tier, because otherwise the list wouldn't be that cool. Next, we have Ginryusai Yamamoto. Yamamoto stole the show in the 1000-Year Blood War with some of the craziest fights and the craziest animation, literally having his Bankai have 4 different parts with the Zanka no Tachi. Yamamoto, whenever I was reading his fight initially, I remember I was on a work break at lunch and I was on a walk. It was super hot outside. It was summertime and I was reading his fight and I was going absolutely crazy and my phone was overheating, which was perfect because, you know, obviously he was making the entire world hot within Soul Society. So it was just a perfect pairing moment. And my God, it's one of those random forever memories that you'll just remember, like whenever you're an old man, that really makes no sense why you remember it so vividly. But, you know, I digress. Yamamoto is an absolute epitome of what it means to be a badass. And I love characters that, you know, despite growing old, they're continually strong. So obviously in Soul Society, if someone lives a long time, it's kind of indicative that they're absolutely monstrous. And Yamamoto is living proof of that, which sets him in the God tier. Next, we have Soi Fon. Soi Fon is kind of a character I feel who's slept on, and people often kind of just think she's a middle tier character. And I know a lot of people dislike her as well. Soi Fon, for me, she's actually someone who's grown on me throughout the story. I always thought her Shikai was really incredible, and it's one of my favorite Shikais of the story because of the assassination ability. And the Bankai is such a contrast to it with her literally having a bazooka, and despite being the leader of the stealth force, obviously a bazooka doesn't pair well with assassin activities, but, you know, she has a very lively and rambunctious personality, which her Bankai is reflective of. So despite her Shikai being indicative of, you know, her assassin antics and everything, her Bankai being so reflective of her, you know, brash and abrasive nature, you know, I love that about her. Although I do not put her in the love these character list, she will be in the B. I like her a lot. Soi Fon, she's better than a lot of people think. Yoruichi. My God, if you could create a ride or die individual, you would create Yoruichi. Yoruichi for Urahara is willing to give up everything in her position within Soul Society, being part of nobility, all because she believes Kisuke Urahara was innocent. And although their relationship isn't really that like fleshed out in terms of their backstory, are they lovers? You know, in my headcanon, yeah, they're lovers. Obviously, they kind of live together and everything. But, you know, despite that, Yoruichi is a ride or die for Urahara, and she's such a badass character within the story. One of the things I love within anime and manga is the badass woman who's like doesn't take shit from anybody and can stand on her own 2 feet and doesn't need to be helped by anybody. And I love how she kind of bullies Urahara around sometimes despite his perviness. Yoruichi is a fantastic character. She has crazy abilities. She's also a mentor to Ichigo, so she parallels Urahara in that way. And she's such a driving force for the development of Ichigo and the rest of the young gang. Also, whenever that one manga panel is animated, I don't know if they'll be able to show it all because I feel like it'll be censored, but y'all know which one I'm talking about, and it's a wink wink and a nod nod. Anyways, I'm getting very sidetracked. She goes in the A tier. I love her as a character. And next we have Gin, and Gin is one of the first captains we're introduced to, alongside obviously Byakuya and Kenpachi, but Byakuya came first, of course. But Gin is one of the coolest characters within the story because he was literally on covert ops antics the entire story without anybody knowing, and the fact that he was able to like blitz and surprise Isen is such a cool thing. Obviously, you know, he dies in the end, and he isn't able to actually stop Aizen, but his undying devotion to Rangiku and literally waiting all these years to enact revenge on the man who harmed the woman he loved, it's so badass. And I love that there's very few times we can see Gin's eyes, but the times we see his eyes, it's so clear what his intentions are. Gin is a character I would be wishing for more than anything to be in the Hell Arc as one of the central focuses, and he's by far one of the coolest characters within the story, so we're going to put him in A tier. Next we have Love, and Love is a cool captain. I enjoyed his fight in the 1,000-Year Blood War. He has a really unique ability compared to the other Shinigami, which makes him a lot more inherently unique than other captains, to be honest. But despite that, Love was never a character that overly compelled me. He's really cool and I like all his interactions, and I love his ability, of course, with his music, but he isn't a character who I was ever like, my gosh, you know, I wish I could be like him or anything like that. Because often when I watch anime or manga, I'm like, damn, like, you know, I'm gonna pick up some of these characteristics of these characters, you know, like the reckless abandon of Kenpachi, or, you know, the intelligence of Urahara. I guess with Love, I wish I could play some musical instruments, but that doesn't keep me up at night too much. I'll put him in the mid tier because I do love Love, and I don't like the Visored hate too much, so I think mid tier is a fine place for him. Next, we have Isane. And poor Isane, as a character, she was really cool, and she was cool as a lieutenant, but not a captain. You know, I feel like the current Gote 13 is by far the weakest we've seen for generations, and obviously Isane doesn't have a lot of time to develop into a captain-esque figure like her predecessor was, so of course that puts her at a little bit of a disadvantage. And I don't mean to say that I hate Isane, but she isn't someone that I think I could put in the mid-tier. I guess the D tier would be appropriate if I do want to see more of it, but she's kind of in the E tier for me. Although I did love that whenever she saw Unohana left that letter, I like seeing the emotion from there. But as a captain, she's not nearly as cool for me. Also, we really haven't seen her ability for fighting that much, but you know, I digress. E is where she'll belong. We do need someone in the E tier. Speaking of her predecessor, we have Unohana, and Unohana came as one of the biggest surprises throughout this entire story to all of us. Unohana, Unomami, whichever one, you know, she had these little glimpses of being like a monster throughout the story, with her voice suddenly switching to, you know, being literally terrifying and scaring Ichigo and myself alongside with it. And clearly she had her braids covering her scar, and once I realized that revelation and she had her hair down, you know, it was so significant of her change, of now that she has her hair down, she can go all out and revert to being the original true Kenpachi. And along with that, being the original true Kenpachi is insane that she's one of the literal people who survived for over 1,000 years with the most bloodthirsty and war criminals Soul Society's ever seen. And for that, she belongs in the A tier. I love her. And, you know, I wish more than anything she had more fights besides the one with Kenpachi. I think that could have landed her into the God tier. Obviously, her fight with Kenpachi was a one-time fight given the circumstances. But, you know, I wish she had a little bit more time to fight. And perhaps in the Hell Arc, we'll see her a little bit more. Next, we have Isen. Isen is one of the most iconic characters of the story, and I'd be lying if I said he isn't one of my all-time favorites in my top 5. Isen completely took the story and flipped it on its head within the Soul Society arc, and he's one of the most insane characters in terms of like power in general. Like his Kyokusu Getsu is busted, and he's like planetary level or beyond planetary level. To be honest, I'm not really much of a power scaler, but it sounds cool to say out loud. Isen is just the epitome of badass, along with his drip, like taking off his glasses after he ascends to the heavens, and he's like, I will now be the one to sit atop heaven because there's no current god. You know, that's insane to me. I still think back on his quote where when he's talking with Yuhabak, he tells Yuhabak is that his only goal has been to seek to eviscerate all those who seek to control him. Aizen time and time again has proven that he isn't a like all-time evil. He's someone who doesn't want to be ruled over. And I think that's something that's like really cool about him as an antagonist and as a villain. And my God, in the last arc with him saying, welcome to my Soul Society, genuine chills as I say that out loud. Aizen is in the God tier of God tier. And he's an incredible character and one of my all-time favorites from any story of all time. Next on the list, we have Shinji. Shinji, I love his bowl cut, and I love when he pulled up to the story literally walking upside down. And one of my only qualms with Shinji is that throughout the 1,000-Year Blood War, he doesn't get that many fights, or actually like any fights at all, to be honest. And we also don't get to see his Bankai, and that's one of the things I want within Bleach. You know, like I geek out anytime that a captain is like Bankai, and it just would have been so fitting. But you know, with the added scenes within the 1,000-Year Blood War, it is a potentiality we will get to see Shinji fight. Shinji, I feel like his potential was a little bit, you know, not fully utilized, given that I feel like the Visors would be inherently a counter directly to the Quincy. But, you know, obviously we don't have time for every single character to have screen time to fight the Quincy. And yeah, with Shinji, I'll put him with the B tier. I like him a lot. But, you know, I feel like this might be a controversial one with Shinji being B tier, but, you know, I'll stand by my choices. Next, we have Byakuya. Byakuya is a fantastic character, and his development over time is one of the things that I love about Bleach's storytelling, how Byakuya is able to be transformed by Ichigo in terms of his beliefs within the current system and structure of how things are, and finally being able to accept and understand Rukia and be supportive of his younger sister. It's a beautiful moment in a transition over time as he fully enables Rukia to become the best version of herself and gives her the confidence to unleash her Bankai versus Asnot. That's an S tier moment, and I love the development for that. You know, in Soul Society, I know a lot of people said he should have died, and you know, I kind of teeter-totter on whether I think he should have died within the invasion, because it would have added a lot more depth and poignance. But nonetheless, I think his character arc needed to come to a conclusion within the conclusion of him and Rukia, and I think it was a fantastic culmination of the growth of him over time, and for that, I'll put him in the B tier. I like him a lot. He's definitely a strong B, and as I look at this list, yeah, I think he's on par with the rest of the B tier characters. Next is Tetsuzaimon, and very similar to Isane, Tetsuzaimon does not speak to me too heavily. I liked his role within the We Do Not Always Love You light novel, which is actually really cool, and I actually love that light novel. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend reading it. But Tetsuzaimon is not the coolest of characters. He doesn't have that many fights or feats as of now, but nonetheless, Tetsuzaimon, he's okay, but you know, he isn't someone I consider as cool of a captain as all the previous captains we've seen thus far. So I'll put him in the A tier with Isane. It's unfortunate two of the newest captains don't really get that much love, but you know, it's a cold world out here. Next, we have Komamura. Komamura was really cool when he was introduced within the story with the bucket over his face, and I liked seeing the development of him learning to accept himself and, you know, be outspoken of the fact that he doesn't look like everybody else. I think that's really beautiful within storytelling, and I loved his reckless abandon when he's fighting Bambietta. But Komamura, he didn't speak to me like other captains have. I'll put him in the mid tier. He's not a bad captain by any means, but he isn't someone who I would say is like in really anybody's like maybe top 5, top 7 captains, unless I'm wrong. So let me know in the comment section below if y'all like Komamura. Still a solid character though, guys. No hate towards our dog boy. Next we have Love. Love is a really drippy character, and I love his afro. I feel like he doesn't get that much focus throughout the story. I liked whenever he was fighting versus Stark, but his Shikai didn't really like speak to me that much in terms of like how cool it was. And, you know, he doesn't get that much development. So I'll kind of put him in the, I would like to see more, because there's not a crazy amount of Love content out there, but being part of the Visards, inherently he's really cool. Oh my god, next on the list we have Shunsui Kiraku. I remember when I first saw Shunsui, I was like, who is this dude with like this like 5 o'clock shadow and this chest hair who seemed like, you know, super thirsty towards his lieutenant? Shunsui is so badass, and you know, throughout the story he grows on me more and more, because whenever he was initially introduced, right, I loved him, but over time I was like, this is one of the coolest characters within the story. He's so laid back, but he's a laid back shooter. Like on God, he fights everybody that has pistols, and despite that, he's still scrapping with a sword. And over time, as we learn, his Shikai is like a child's game, but his Bankai is literally such a tragic drama, and it's reflective of the inner turmoil he faces in the depression and the reason he drinks so much. And he has so much duality that despite his cheery, happy-go-lucky, outwardly extroverted nature, you know, he harbors a lot of demons. And I think that's like a lot of people in this world who come across really happy and really joyous all the time. You know, there are things they deal with, and I love this duality that's reflected again with his Shikai and his Bankai being completely opposite. Shunsui is one of the greatest characters within this story. And it still makes me laugh out loud to think that every single matchup he's fighting dudes who have pistols. It's fantastic. He's a god tier captain. Next we have Lisa the perv. I remember when I was seeing her reading kind of Playboy type magazines during Ichigo's training. I thought that was fantastic. And on principle of that, she is above D tier. I love how she gets super angry with Shunsui, and you know, she kind of sets him straight in a lot of regards, and I love their interactions. Also, within the We Do Not Always Love You, she also had some screen time there, and so she has pretty good development. I like Lisa a lot as a character. I love her design as well. You know, that schoolgirl fit, very cool. She looks fantastic. She's funny, and you know, although she doesn't have like the craziest of fights, nonetheless, you know, I like her a lot. Next, we have Tosin, and Tosin is a beautifully written character. I remember when first seeing him, I'm like, dude, how is there a blind dude who's a captain? And it's like one of those moments where he's like, man, he's blind because of the cruelties of this world. You know, very valid. But obviously, whenever he has the betrayal alongside Gin and Isen, I found it so interesting that he had a resurrection that gave him far too much sight. And with gaining sight, he lost sight of himself and his true objective all this time for justice. He had one of the coolest fights when he fought Kenpachi. His Bankai is absolutely insane. And he's one of the characters who time and time again, you know, he doesn't really have any bad moments particularly. Tosin all around is a solid character, and I don't see anybody who can really hate Tosin, to be honest. So he's easily a B tier for me. I like him a lot. Do I love him? Maybe a little bit, you know, but he'll reside in the B tier. Last on the list, we have Kensei. Kensei is really cool, and I like that he's the inspiration for Shuhei getting the 6ix9ine tattoo, but Kensei, to be honest, I wish his Bankai was like actually like fighting with a sword rather than, you know, some fisticuffs. But he's a solid captain. He's super badass. I love how muscular he is. He's like one of those like Giga Chad type characters. He's decently good. You know, he's a Visored as well, and how he's loved the Visored. And I think he gets a mid-tier for me as a character. He's really cool, but, you know, nonetheless, he isn't someone I think can be on par with like Tosin, Byakuya, Shinji, and the rest of them. So guys, this is actually a pretty solid list, and I stand by all these options. I'm glad there wasn't too many of the god tier characters like outweighing, you know, other rankings. So this list, now that I'm looking at it like with the full picture, I'm actually really proud of this list, and I stand by all of these picks. You know, the god tier characters, Yamamoto, Urahara, Aizen, Shunsui, I stand by that like on God. They're fantastic characters, some of the coolest within the story, and I think only those 4 can sit in the god tier. You know, usually I'm so easily like happy by things and overly excited, so I'm honestly surprised that there weren't any more god tier characters, but I made sure today to be far more picky with my selection process. Guys, this is the tier list. If you want to see more tier lists like this, you know, we could do one of lieutenants, we can do one of Espada, we can do one of Sternritter. Although with the Sternritter one, there are quite a lot of them, but, you know, nonetheless, we could do it. So if you want to see more of these tier list videos like this, they're super fun to make and casual. So please let me know what you would like to see, because we have so many things coming, and I definitely want to have more videos like this where it's just me in the face cam talking to you guys, because it feels way more personal, and I feel like we can have a lot of fun with these videos. Like, genuinely, this was so fun to make. Oh my God, we're back to full screen. Guys, I have a huge goal this year, and that's to reach 10,000 subscribers. So if you want to help me reach that goal and you aren't already subscribed, please do drop a subscription, as it means the world to me and really shows me that you like this style of content. I hope you all have a beautiful week and weekend. As always, be greedier, and I will catch you all next time.